I have a great friend who, as a kid, he attended a boarding school. In fact, it was a religious boarding school. Now, we're talking like strict military-style boarding school, bed made, uniform pressed, shoes polished, every hair in place. And because it was a religious boarding school, they had chapel every single day, including Saturday and Sunday. We're talking divinity classes, Bible classes. Now, I've had some amazing conversations with this guy. I love this guy. And as I have become good friends with him over the past few years, here is what is evident. His experience as a kid in this religious boarding school has shaped and in many ways determined his view of God and his view of Jesus in the Bible and of church. And to this day, all of these years later, I mean, we're talking decades later, his view, his perspective is shaped by his experience in this religious boarding school when he was a kid. Now, the same is true for me, and the same is true for you. There are experiences in your past, many of them when you were a kid. They could be good experiences, they can be bad experiences, but these experiences, they shape your view, how you perceive, how you view, how you interact, how you see your relationship with God, and how you see your relationship with Jesus and the church and the Bible. And this is just a fact. It's just the reality of life that you have been shaped by your experiences. Now, at the core of this conversation is what I consider to be the number one sticking point. I mean, this is probably the biggest perception, or you could say the biggest misperception. This is something that all of us have to wrestle with if we're serious about exploring faith. I mean, this is the most perplexing aspect regarding faith. It's this: rules. The role of rules. I mean, maybe we could say it this way. What is the role of rules as it relates to God and Jesus and faith? I mean, when it comes to God, when it comes to faith, when it comes to the idea of trust, when it comes to your confidence in God, what is the role of rules? I mean, practically speaking, rules are often the centerpiece of religious life. I mean, in every religious system, we run up against rules, and it can be really overwhelming and really confusing because there's all these different versions and all these different systems. If you grow up Catholic, there's this list of things you must do. Or if you're Protestant, even within the Protestant world, there's all of these different ones. There's Baptist and Presbyterian and Methodist, just to name a few. And it's confusing. And regardless of your faith story or your faith background, you have at some point bumped up against rules. And honestly, this is why many of you have walked away. You have rebelled and gone the other direction because there is this undercurrent. And maybe it's not spoken this directly. Maybe it's not said out loud. But the undercurrent is this: if you follow the rules, God is happy with you. He will love you. You will be accepted. You belong. You can be part. Maybe you can even get a ticket to heaven. But if you don't, God will not be happy with you. And you are unloved. You are rejected. You are not accepted. And in some faith systems, you are doomed to hell, eternity apart from God. But what if a relationship with God doesn't depend on your rule keeping? I mean, when it comes to your relationship with God, what is the role of rules? Today, I want to dive into this topic. I mean, what is the relationship between God and rules? And specifically, is there a relationship between rules and a God we believe created the world, created you, that cares about you, that loves you, that longs to be in an intimate, loving, authentic relationship with you? Now, this is important, and I think we need to start here because there's something very important to consider. This I believe, is a premise or a principle that colors this entire conversation. Rules always assume a relationship. See, wherever there are rules, wherever you are accountable to a set of rules, there is a relationship. Now, let me try to paint this picture and maybe help us understand this conversation or get some handles on this conversation. So let me come up with some categories. These are examples or models of rules, okay? So the first model that I want to talk about is, we'll just call it the family model, right? The parent model. This is the family model, right? Okay, you were born into a family, and you are part of the family, right? You're born into the family, and then your parents establish rules. They did not make the rules to make you a part of the family. You were already a part of the family. Then they established the rules. So when you're a kid, there's rules. And when you're in middle school and high school, there are rules. And eventually you outgrow the rules. But when you are a kid, right, you got rules. And you have rules. And the rules are not to become part of the family, but the rules are actually because you were part of the family. Now, it's interesting, right? If you are a parent, you only set rules for your kids. I mean, we've all wanted to set rules for other kids, right? For kids from other families. But parents don't establish rules for other people's kids, right? In the family model of rules, rules are for members of the family. Rules don't make you part of the family. They are because you are part of the family. Relationship precedes the rules. Because of, they don't make you part of, right? It's the family model. Now, the second model of rules, let's just call it the club model, right? And I think you kind of get this. In this model, you agree to the rules, right? You accept the rules, then you become a part. Then you have a relationship, right? You sign a contract. You sign an agreement, right? It's an agreement to abide by the rules. And agreeing to the rules is how the relationship is established. Rules in order to have a relationship. And in this arrangement, if you break the rules, it can result in your termination from the relationship. Once you agree to the rules, you get in, right? I mean, this could be a health club. If you're an employee, like to work here are the expectations. You have to sign this contract, right? If you join a country club. In fact, I have a friend who is a member of a local country club here in the Gables. And to join, right, you pay, and then you agree to the rules. And there's a dress code, and there's a behavior code, and there's rules and regulations. And this is what you have to do to be a part of the club. If you don't do it, then you are out. Thanks for coming, and they kick you out of the club, which is probably why he's never invited me to go to the club with him, right? So let's contrast these. In the family model, right, you get the rules because of the relationship, family model. In the club model, you accept the rules in order to establish the relationship. Now, there's a third category that we'll talk about here, and this one we're going to call the HOA model, or the Homeowners Association model, right? Many of you are familiar with this, right? You don't always know where you stand. You buy or maybe you rent, and if you obey the rules, everything's fine. You don't hear anything. But if you violate the rules, what happens? You get a nasty letter or you get a nasty email. And they can't actually make you move, but they can make it awkward. They can treat you in such a way that you wished you lived somewhere else. There's someone in our church who got a letter recently because he had branches or palm fronds in front of his townhome. And he gets a nasty letter. What's the letter say? You're in violation of HOA code number, blah, 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 blah. You need to move these immediately. Here's the point. And here's where we're going with all of this. This is why this is important to understand. This is why I want you to get this. Wherever there are rules, you are in a relationship. These two things go together. Relationship, rules, they go together. Now, if you take these ideas and you transpose these ideas onto the idea of God and Jesus and church and Bible, onto a religious system, this gets really confusing. I mean, which one is it? I mean, is it the family model? Like you're in with God? No matter what you do, you're in, but you have rules to live by? Or is it the club model. If you behave, right? If you get in, right? If you keep the rules, you get in. And you have to keep behaving. You have to continue to keep the rules and regulations, because if you screw up, if you mess up, you're out and you get kicked out. And I know many of you have a background, maybe in a church, that has this type of mindset. Or is it the HOA model, which is kind of this model like, well, you don't really know where you stand. I mean, you're in just because you're human. You're a human being and can't really be kicked out. You're a human. They can't make you not a human. But every once in a while, I'm going to just send you a nasty letter or a nasty email, and it's just going to try to guilt you or shame you to death and make you feel really bad about yourself. And I'm never going to be fully happy with you. I will just kind of tolerate you, or I'll just kind of put up with you. As we're talking about this whole idea, some of you are reacting theologically, right? You're trying to think intellectually, theologically, while others of you are reacting more emotionally. See, as we're sorting this whole thing out, as we're wrestling, as we're exploring, like, is there a God? I mean, is he a personal God? I mean, what is he really like? I mean, does he know me? Does he love me? Does he accept me? It can get very emotional and it can get very personal. And your experience, for many of you, your childhood experiences, they shape, they color your perspective and your view. I mean, maybe you were taught one model, but you actually feel another. I mean, maybe you were taught the family model. Maybe that's what someone taught you in Sunday school or when you were a kid at a vacation Bible school, but you never really felt part of the family. I mean, you never felt in. You never felt loved. I mean, which one is it? I mean, what's truth? You know, at the end of the day, what is God like? I mean, what does God expect of me? I mean, when am I in? When am I accepted? When am I loved? And when am I out? And how am I supposed to know? So you have to sort all of this out in your faith journey. Now, to help us kind of wrestle with this, I want to go back to the oldest set of rules that were ever given. And this is so well known and so well documented that even if you're not a church person or you're new, you will get this, right? And so we go back to the oldest set of rules, and we call them what? The 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments. These were written in 1446 BC. That's 1,500 years before Jesus. Now, we get a couple of helpful insights from the story surrounding the 10 Commandments, which is found in Exodus chapter 20. Now, let me give you a little context. Go with me here. Some of you know the story, right? The story begins with a guy named Abraham. And God chose Abraham. And God made Abraham a promise. He said, Abraham, I will make you a great nation. Through you, all the world will be blessed. And so Abraham had a son named Isaac, and Isaac had a son named Jacob, and Jacob had 12 sons, including Joseph, right? Joseph, coat of many colors. But Joseph's brothers are jealous, and so they sold Joseph into slavery, and he ends up in Egypt. And there's this amazing story that basically ends with the rise of Joseph, and then there's a famine, and because of the famine, his family is reunited with Joseph in Egypt, and they all move to Egypt. But one day, there's a new Pharaoh, a new sheriff in town, and the people of God, Abraham's descendants, Joseph's descendants, they find themselves in slavery for 400 years. They're a nation of slaves. I thought we were going to be a great nation. But the story's not over. And God raises up a new leader by the name of Moses. And Moses goes to Pharaoh, and he says, let my people go. And Pharaoh says, no. And then nature freaks out, right? And frogs and gnats and locusts and darkness. And Moses leads the nation out of Egypt. And about 3 months after they were delivered from Egypt, they end up at a mountain called Mount Sinai. And Moses goes up to the top of the mountain. And it's on top of the mountain that Moses gets the 10 Commandments. And God gives the nation their first set of rules, Exodus chapter 20. And what we're going to read here is kind of a prelude or an introduction to the 10 Commandments. And I believe it offers us insights into how rules and God fit together. Here's how it goes. Exodus chapter 20, verse 1. And God spoke all these words. He said, I am the Lord your God who. Now, before I give you the rules, you must know you are mine and I am yours. Let's get this established. God declared his relationship with the nation before telling them what is required. See, he's going to give them rules because they belong to him. He was their God and they were his people. Exodus 21, and God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God who, what? Brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. In other words, I am the Lord your God who did something significant for you without requiring anything from you. I mean, 3 months earlier, you were slaves, 400 years of being slaves. You were a nation with no hope, no future. Now you are free, and they had done nothing to deserve it. A very interesting thing happens. At the end of the plagues that God does in Egypt, God through Moses speaks to the people. Now remember, this is pre-10 Commandments. There's no rules, no law. There is something God wants you to do. God wants you to trust him. God's message is, trust me. And through Moses, God says, here's what I want you to do. Have a meal, you slaughter a lamb, you take the blood, and you put it on the doorpost, over the top of the door and the sides of the door. What? Why would we do that? God says, trust me. But blood on, what difference does it make? God says, trust me. And then God says, hey, pack your bags, you're leaving tomorrow. What? Hey, hold up, man. We've been slaves for 400 years. We're leaving tomorrow. Trust me. And that night, God sends the angel of death into the land of Egypt. And he passed over every house that had blood on the door. And the next morning, Pharaoh says, go. And that becomes the celebration of Passover. It marked the night. Not to remember the law, not to remember the 10 Commandments, but to remember the night that God whispered to them, trust me, and in trusting me, you will find deliverance from slavery in Egypt. So here they are 3 weeks later. They're gathered at Mount Sinai. And after defining and affirming their relationship, God issued his very first command, his very first rule. Exodus 23. You shall have no other gods before me. And after demonstrating his power, God says to them, trust me. Look at this. See, the 10 Commandments were a confirmation of, not a condition of, Israel's relationship with God. I mean, here's the big idea. Don't miss this. God did not give them rules as a means to establish a relationship. With God, relationship precedes the rules. It's the family model. The relationship is before the rules. So, Greg, what is the role of rules? Rules are not a confirmation of, rules are a confirmation of, not a condition of a relationship with God. In other words, God's rules gives rules to those who are in a relationship with him. Now enter Jesus into this conversation. And it's no surprise that when Jesus burst onto the scene 1,500 years later, after the 10 Commandments, what happens? He turns nature upside down again. And as with Moses, nature freaks out. And Jesus heals. And he calms storms. And he turns water into wine. And he speaks to the wind. And he does things that no one could imagine. And then he says, trust me. Trust me. And John, who was a close personal friend of Jesus, who walked with Jesus for years, who was an eyewitness to his life and his ministry, as he's reflecting back on his time with Jesus in his gospel, the Gospel of John, his eyewitness account, he begins with these amazing words. John chapter 1, verse 1. He says, in the beginning, the Word, Jesus, was already there. Jesus was with God. Jesus was God. He, Jesus, was with God from the beginning. He made all things through the Word. God did not make anything without him. It is the Word, Jesus, who caused everything to live. Because of this, he brought light to all people. The light shines in the dark, and the dark cannot put it out. And John begins his gospel by talking about Jesus. And he says he's at the beginning. He's the creator and the maker. And he's the light for all people, shining in the darkness. And then look what he says, verse 10. He says the Word, Jesus was now in the world. God had made the world through him, but the people in the world did not know who he was. He came to his own place, but his own people did not accept him. Verse 12, look at this. But some people did accept him, and they believed in him, and he gave authority to those people to become God's children. I mean, look what he's saying. John 1:12. To all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right or the authority to become children of God. All people who receive, who accept, who believe in, or who trust in, he gave the right, he gave authority, what? To become, to be children. Children of God, a daughter of God, a son of God. An invitation to you and to me to be a child of God. See, this means family model. See, my friend who I love dearly, who attended a religious boarding school as a kid, he struggles so much. He sees God as this authoritative, military-style leader who's just waiting for him to mess up. Just waiting for him to step out of line so he can punish, so he can kick him out. See, if you keep all the rules, then I will love you. But if you mess up, if you break the rules, if you step out of line, it's punishment and judgment and condemnation. Meanwhile, I have 3 kids who I love dearly, and we have rules. We have family rules. Why? Because I love them. Don't run out into the street. Why? It's for you. It's for your safety. Don't lie. Don't lie to me. Don't lie to your mom. Why? It's for you. It's for your heart, because the truth is the best and the truth wins. But no matter what you do, I love you. And see, God says to you, and God says to me, anything I ask, it's evidence of my love for you. And God says to you, and God says to me, hey, anything I require is evidence of our relationship. See, we have a relationship. You can trust me, because all along, it's always been about you. I want to leave you with a question. I want you to wrestle with this question. How do you relate to God? How do you relate to God? Have you entered a relationship with God through the door of faith, or have you been trying to behave your way in? John said in John 1:12, to all who did receive him, to those who believed in, who trusted his name, he gave the right to become children of God. God, I thank you so much that you look at us as your sons and as your daughters. And because of Jesus, God, not because of our behavior, not because we're good enough, not because our good outweighs our bad, God, but you look at us and you say that I love you and I want to be in an intimate, loving relationship with you. So, God, thank you that you made a way. God, I pray, God, for those who are just struggling with their perception or maybe misperception of you, God, who have had experiences in a church or in a school or in a family or somewhere along the way, God, that have distorted their view of you. God, I pray that somehow right now that you could break through and that they could see you for who you really are. God, thank you for loving us. Thank you for giving us peace and rest and hope and grace and mercy and compassion. So, God, we love you now. We can pray boldly because of Jesus. And it's in his name I do pray. Amen.
Good morning, everyone. We're now going to transition into our time of communion. You know, at the Last Supper, Jesus sat with his disciples. They had no idea what was about to happen. But he took a small piece of bread and a cup of wine, And he said to them, when you eat and drink of the bread and the wine, remember me. I can imagine at that time, what are they going to remember? Well, the next day, Jesus was going to die on a cross, but then he was going to rise from the dead for our salvation. So let's remember through the bread or cracker and that cup of juice, the sacrifice Jesus made for us. Let's give him all the praise and glory that he deserves.